The asphalt shimmered under the relentless Nevada sun, a cruel haze rising in waves that warped the horizon into a mirage of false hope. I stood at the edge of a desolate truck stop off I-80, my worn boots scuffing the cracked pavement, staring at the empty patch of dust where my beat-up Chevy pickup used to sit. My wife, Tara, and her two best friends, Vanessa and Kim, were gone, vanished like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. With them went my phone, my wallet, every damn thing I'd packed for this cursed road trip to Lake Tahoe. All I had left was a crumpled pack of Marlboros in my pocket, a lighter with a flickering flame, and a gnawing hollow ache in my gut that whispered, this wasn't just another one of their twisted games. 7 years. That's how long Tara and I had been married. 7 years of her brushing off my frustrations with a laugh, her friends treating me like the spare tire they'd kick around for fun. This trip was her brainchild, a so-called girls' weekend. She'd guilt-tripped me into joining. Come on, Jake, it'll be a blast, she'd cooed, her hazel eyes glinting with that charm I used to melt for, back when I thought it meant something. I'd caved like I always did, dragging myself across state lines because I figured it'd keep her happy, keep us steady. 3 days in, I was drowning in misery. Vanessa's snarky digs about my construction job cutting deeper each time, Kim's fake sympathy when I didn't laugh at their jab stinging like salt in a wound. I stuck it out, though, for her. Now here I was, stranded in the middle of nowhere, the gas station's flickering sign buzzing like a dying fly overhead. I'd stepped inside for a soda, my throat parched from the dry heat, figuring they'd wait. They always waited, me, the patient mule, trailing behind their giggles and inside jokes. Except this time they didn't. I lit a cigarette, the smoke curling upward into the arid sky, and replayed the morning in my head. Tara's laughter with Vanessa over runny eggs at breakfast, Kim's smirk when I fumbled my coffee mug and stained my shirt. Lighten up, Jake, Tara had said, waving it off with that dismissive flick of her wrist I'd come to hate. I should have seen it coming, should have caught the glint in their eyes the way they'd been poking at me harder, testing how much I'd take before I snapped. An hour crawled by, then 2, the sun climbing higher and turning the air into a furnace. My neck burned, sweat soaked through my faded Metallica tee, plastering it to my skin like a second layer of regret. I kicked a jagged rock across the lot, watching it skitter into the dust, and felt the truth settle in heavy and cold. They weren't coming back. It hit me like a fist to the stomach. Not just that they ditched me, but that Tara had chosen this. She'd climbed into that truck, her laughter mingling with Vanessa's and Kim's, and peeled out without a backward glance. 7 years of me bending over backwards, swallowing their crap, and I was nothing to her but a punchline, a story to giggle over later by the lake. A semi-truck growled into Thelot, its brakes hissing like an angry snake as it rolled to a stop. The driver, a weathered guy with a trucker hat pulled low and a beard like rusted wire, leaned out the window. "You lost, man." His voice was rough, gravel scraped over years of shouting over engines, but there was a flicker of kindness in it, unintrusive. "Something like that," I muttered, flicking ash off my cigarette, the ember glowing briefly before dying in the heat. "Ride ditched me." He squinted at me through the glare, then jerked his head. "Hop in, I'm headed toward Reno. You can figure your shit out there." I climbed into the cab, the leather seat groaning under my weight, hot against my thighs. The truck smelled of diesel, stale coffee, and a faint whiff of tobacco, gritty, lived in. A far cry from the perfumed bubble Tara and her friends lived in. As we pulled onto the highway, the guy, Rusty, he grunted after a mile, kept the talk light, rambling about the heat, the road ahead, a dive bar in Reno with cheap beer and a jukebox that still worked. I stared out the window, the desert stretching, out endless and unforgiving, a barren mirror to the mess inside me. Anger simmered, sure, but something else stirred too. Relief, maybe, sharp and unexpected, like a chain I'd been hauling around for years had finally rusted through and snapped, leaving me lighter, even if I didn't know what to do with it. Yet, Reno slammed into me like a punch, neon lights flashing garish promises, casino bells clanging a chaotic symphony, the hum of desperate dreamers chasing luck on borrowed time. Rusty dropped me off near a Greyhound station, tossing me a crumpled $10 bill from the dash. "For the road, kid," he said, tipping his hat with a nod. I mumbled a thanks, my throat tight with something I couldn't name, and watched his rig rumble off into the dusk, taillights fading into the glow. $10 wouldn't carry me far, but it bought me a greasy burger at a diner across the street, a hole-in-the-wall joint with sticky counters and a waitress who didn't bother smiling. I sat there, chewing slow, the chatter of slot machines seeping in from outside like a taunting echo. My hands gripped the table's edge, nails digging into the chipped formica until they left crescent marks. I could have borrowed a phone, called Tara, demanded answers. Hell, demanded she turn that truck around and face me. But what would she say? "It was a prank, Jake. Chill out." I'd heard that line too many times. Every time I'd dared call out her friend's bullshit, she'd pout, flip her hair, twist it until I felt like the jerk for not laughing along. 7 years of that dance, and I was done stepping on her cues. No, not this time. I finished the burger, wiped the grease off my hands with a flimsy napkin, and hauled myself to the station. The ticket guy didn't even glance up as I slid rusty-sten across the counter. "Next bus to Sacramento," I said, voice flat. It'd get me closer to home, or whatever home used to be. I didn't have a plan, didn't know what waited there, but I wasn't about to beg her to come fetch me like some lost. "Dog!" The bus ride blurred into 6 hours of rattling seats, the drone of strangers' whispers, and the rhythmic thump of tires on asphalt. I pressed my forehead against the window, the glass cool against my skin, and watched the desert fade into scrubland, then patchy trees as the miles ticked by. My mind looped back to Tara, her leaning into Vanessa's hushed conspiracies, Kim's eyes glinting with glee when she landed a barb. 7 years I'd swallowed it, convinced myself that's what love looked like, taking the hits, grinning through the bruises, because losing her scared Memma than the pain. Now in the dim hum of that bus it clicked. She'd never had my back, not once, not ever. Sacramento spat me out at dawn, the sky streaked with pink and grey, the air damp with early mist. I had no cash, no roadmap, just the clothes clinging. To my back and a fire in my chest I couldn't put a name to. Anger, betrayal, maybe something fiercer. I wandered downtown, past coffee shops flickering to life and suits hustling to offices, until I stumbled onto a construction site. A high-rise, skeleton towered over the street, cranes swinging steel beams into place with a clang that echoed in my bones. It was chaos, grit, sweat, and long hours, but I knew that world. I'd been a foreman for 5 years before Tara sweet-talked me into a cushy warehouse job near her. "Less stress, Jake," she'd said, all smiles. More like less of me, she had to justify to her clique. A guy in a hard hat stood by the gate, clipboard in hand, barking into a radio with the clipped precision of someone who didn't take shit. I walked up, hands shoved deep in my pockets. "You hiring?" He sized me up, dirty tee, unshaven jaw, probably stinking of bus seats and desperation. "You done this before?" 5 years as a foreman, concrete, framing, the works. He raised an eyebrow, skeptical, then jerked his thumb toward a trailer. "Talk to Vic. He's down a man, don't fuck it up." Vic was a bull of a guy, broad shoulders, no neck, and zero patience. He didn't give a damn about my sob story, just eyed my hands like they'd tell him all he needed to know. "Start today," he grunted, tossing me a vest and a scratched-up helmet. "Pays cash till you sort your ID, don't make me regret this." I didn't. I threw myself into it, hauling rebar until my arms shook, mixing concrete until my boots were caked grey, climbing scaffolds with a focus that drowned out the noise in my head. The crew was rough around the edges, loud as hell, but fair. They didn't pry, just handed me a water bottle when the sun turned brutal and gave a nod when it pulled my weight. By week's end, Vic slipped me $200 in crumpled bills. "You're not useless," he said, a grunt of approval I took as high praise from a man like him. Days bled into weeks. I crashed at a fleabag motel a block from the site, stained carpets, a bed that creaked like it was dying, and a neon sign that buzzed outside my window all night. Vic helped me file for a replacement ID, bitching the whole time but sticking it out, shoving forms at me with a glare that dared me to screw up. I scraped together enough from my first real paycheck to buy a burner phone, a cheap, clunky thing, from a gas station, and sat on the motel bed staring at it for an hour. Tara hadn't called, neither had Vanessa or Kim. Maybe they figured I'd crawl back, tail wagging, begging for scraps. Maybe they didn't give a damn either way. I shoved the phone into a drawer and left it there, its silence louder than any apology they'd never send. Then the texts hit. 2 months in, my phone buzzed mid-bite of a sandwich during a break, the screen lighting up with Tara's number, blocked years back, but etched into my brain like a scar. "Jake, where are you? We're worried sick." I snorted, crumbs tumbling onto my lap. Worried? They'd left me in the desert with jack shit. An hour later, another. "It was a joke, babe. Come home." Then Vanessa, "Dude, you're overreacting, call us." Kim's was a curt jab. "Grow up?" I read them one by one, jaw clenched so tight it throbbed. A joke. That's all I'd ever been to them. A running gag, a punching bag. They'd kick around for laughs. I could see them at the lake house, sprawled on the deck with wine glasses, cackling about how I'd figure it out. My thumb hovered over the reply button, a flood of curses ready to spill. "Fuck you, Tara. Fuck your games. Fuck all of you." But stopped. What was the point? They'd twist it, laugh it off, make me the bad guy again. I blocked them, every number, every lie, until the phone went quiet. It grabbed my hammer and went back to work, driving nails into wood with a force that felt better than any words I could have typed. 6 months rolled by and I was still in Sacramento. The motel gave way to a studio apartment, small, bare bones, with peeling paint and a single window, but it was mine. Vic made me full-time hire, and I slipped back into running shifts like I'd never left, barking orders, checking loads, keeping the crew in line. They started calling me boss, half joking at first, then with a grudging respect I could feel in their nods. It was clean, earned with sweat and calluses, a world Tara and her crew couldn't touch. One night, after a brutal double shift, I hit a dive bar near the site, a dim pit of chipped wood, buzzing neon, and a jukebox stuck on old Springsteen tracks. The beer was cold, cheap, and cut through the dust in my throat. I was halfway through my second bottle when she walked in, Lena. She'd become a regular, I'd find out later, a mechanic who patched up rigs for the site. Dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail, a smear of grease on her cheek. She moved with her no-bullshit stride that said she'd break your nose before she took your crap. She slid onto the stool beside him, ordered a whiskey neat, and shot me a sideways glance. "You're the new guy Vic won't shut up about," she said, her voice low and rough, a faint smirk tugging her lips. I grinned, caught off guard. "He talks. About me. Says you work like the world owes you a grudge. Maybe it does." She laughed, a sharp reel bark that sliced through the bar's hum, nothing fake or polished about it. We talked. Not about Tara, not about the truck stop, just easy stuff. Music. She liked metal too. Jobs. The time she rebuilt a rig's engine in a snowstorm with nothing but a flashlight and a wrench. I liked her, liked how she didn't prod, didn't fish for drama, just matched my rhythm like we'd known each other forever. By closing time, she'd scribbled her number on a napkin with a grease-stained finger, and I tucked it into my pocket like a lifeline I didn't know I needed. Lena and I took it slow, beers after work, take-out pizzas in her garage while she tinkered with a carburetor, grease under her nails, and a focus I envied. She was nothing like Tara. No mind games, no sidelong smirks waiting for me to stumble so she could laugh. Months in, I told her about the truck stop over a six-pack on her beat-up couch. She didn't blink, just wiped oil off her hands and said, "Sounds like she's the one who lost out, not you." Her voice was steady, matter-of-fact, and I believed her, felt it in my bones like a truth I'd been too blind to see. A year later, we moved in together, a little house by the Sacramento River, with a sagging porch and yard I'd mow on Sundays when the sun wasn't too brutal. Work steadied out. I'd saved enough to buy into Vic's crew as a partner, my name stenciled on the trucks in bold black letters. Life felt good, solid, real, mine in a way it never had with Tara. Then she found me. Not a text this time, but an email, sneaking through an old account I'd forgotten to delete. "Jake, I need to see you. I'm sorry. Everything's falling apart." I stared at it, the cursor blinking like a taunt, my coffee going cold on the kitchen counter. Falling apart? That boutique she'd bragged about, some overpriced clothing store, must have tanked. Her life, her mess. I hit delete, the click of the mouse a small satisfying rebellion. More emails followed, pleas, apologies, sob stories about the divorce, her debts piling up like a house of cards in a storm. I trashed them all one by one until Lena caught me mid-delete one night, her eyebrow arching. Ex-trouble? Ghosts. I said, voice flat. She nodded, didn't push, just handed me a wrench to fix the dripping sink like it was no big deal. 2 years in, Vic retired, clapping me on the shoulder with a gruff, "Don't burn it down before leaving me the crew." I was running it now. 3 sites, 20 guys, my name on every truck rolling through Sacramento. Lena and I got hitched. At the courthouse. Her in faded jeans. Me in a button-up I'd ironed half-assed, both of us grinning like idiots who'd won the lottery. We didn't need a big show, we had each other, and that was enough. Tara's emails dried up eventually, but I knew she was out there, probably still spinning her victim yarn to anyone dumb enough to listen. Poor Tara, abandoned by her mean old husband who couldn't take a joke. Then she showed up 3 years to the day since that truck stop nightmare. I was at the main site, hunched over blueprints under a tarp. The midday sun baking the dirt around us when a car rolled up. A rusted-out sedan, dust-caked and coughing like it was on its last legs. Tara stepped out, thinner than I remembered. Her face sharper, her hair dyed a cheap brassy blonde that didn't suit her. Vanessa and Kim flanked her, looking just as rough. Vanessa's smirk faded to a tight line, Kim's eyes darting like she'd rather be anywhere else. My stomach lurched, but I didn't budge, just watched them shuffle toward me. The clang of hard hats and machinery a steady pulse in the background. "Jake," Tara croaked, her voice cracking like thin ice, eyes already wet with tears she'd probably rehearsed. "We need to talk." I crossed my arms, dirt streaking my sleeves, my stance rooted like the steel beams around us. "Say it." She fumbled through it, lost her house to foreclosure, her car repossessed, her life a wreckage of bad choices and worse luck. Vanessa jumped, in flashing a fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're doing good, right? 3 sites, big man now, we just need a little help, you know, for old time's sake." Kim stared at the ground, mute for once, her usual snark buried under the weight of whatever mess they'd dragged here. I let them talk, let their words pile up like the debris I'd spent years clearing. Excuses, guilt trips, a sob story I didn't buy for a second. Then I laughed, a hard, jagged sound that cut through their chatter like a saw through wood. It stopped them dead. "Help? You left me with nothing, drove off giggling like it was the funniest damn thing in the world. Now you're here because I clawed my way up?" Tara's lip quivered, her hands twisting together. "I'm sorry, Jake, I was stupid, I know that now. Save it." I yanked an envelope from my vest, scribbled a check with a pen I'd borrowed from the site office, and tossed it at her feet. It landed in the dirt, a small puff of dust rising around it. She snatched it up, hands trembling, and froze when she saw the amount, $47.25, the exact cost of that Greyhound ticket from Reno to Sacramento 3 years ago, adjusted for inflation down to the penny. "What the hell is this?" Vanessa snapped, ripping it from Tara's grip, her voice sharp with disbelief. "What you left me with," I said, low and steady, each word a nail in their coffin. "Take it and get out. Don't come back." Tara stared at me, tears spilling down her cheeks, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Vanessa cursed under her breath, crumpling the check in her fist, while Kim shrank back, silent and small. I turned away, boots crunching gravel, the crew's eyes on me as I walked off. I heard them behind me, arguing, voices rising in a tangle of blame and desperation, but I didn't look back. They slunk to their car, the engine sputtering as they peeled out, and the site went quiet again, just the hum of work carrying on. That night, I stood on our porch, Lena beside me, a cold beer sweating in my hand. The Sacramento River glinted. Under the moon, a silver ribbon cutting through the dark, steady and unshaken. "They showed up," I said, voice low, the day still clinging to me like dust. She leaned against the railing, her shoulder brushing mine, unbothered as always. "Are you okay?" "Yeah." I took a long sip, the cold washing down the bitter taste of Tara's tears and Vanessa's snarls. "Better than okay." She smiled, a small, quiet thing that warmed me more than the beer ever could, and slipped her arm around my waist. Tara was gone, really gone this time, not just a ghost in my inbox or a shadow on the edge of my life. I'd built this, Lena, the crew, this house with its creaky floors and river view, out of nothing despite her, because of her leaving me to rot. Every nail I'd driven into a beam, every paycheck I'd cashed, every night I'd come home to Lena's laugh instead of Tara's mockery. It was a middle finger to her and her games, a monument to the man I'd become. I wasn't the guy she'd ditched at that truck stop anymore, the one who'd take her shit and call it love. I was Jake, husband, boss free as hell, and that was worth more than she'd ever understand. Weeks passed, then months, and life settled into a rhythm I could feel in my bones. The crew grew, 3 sites turned to 4, then 5, my name on more trucks than I'd ever dreamed of owning. Lena and I patched up the house, painted the porch a deep blue she picked out, planted a scrappy garden in the yard that somehow survived my neglect. We'd sit out there on weekends, her sipping coffee while I nursed a beer, watching the river roll by and talking about nothing, plans. For a new rig she wanted to rebuild, a site I'd bid on. Dumb stuff like whose turn it was to unclog the sink. It was simple, messy ours. Tara didn't come back. No mails, no texts, no beat-up sedan coughing into my world again. I'd half expected her to try, to slink in with more tears or a new sob story, but the silence held. Maybe she'd finally gotten the message. Maybe she'd moved on to some other sucker who'd buy her act. I didn't care. She was a memory now. A faded snapshot I'd tossed in a mental drawer and forgotten to dust off. One night, after a long day at the newest site, I came home to find Lena in the garage, elbow deep in a truck engine she'd hauled in from work. Grease streaked her arms, her hair falling loose from its tie, and she was muttering curses at a bolt that wouldn't budge. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her with a grin I couldn't shake. "Need a hand?" She glanced up, smirking. "Only if you're better with a wrench than you are with a lawnmower." "Ouch!" I laughed, grabbing a tool from her bench and sliding in beside her. We worked together, her barking orders, me fumbling half the time but keeping up, until the bolt gave way with a satisfying clank. She wiped her hands on a rag, triumphant, and bumped her shoulder against mine. "You're not half bad, you know," she said, echoing Vic's old grunt but with a warmth he'd never muster. "High praise," I shot back, and she laughed. That sharp, real sound I'd fallen for years ago. We dragged the couch out to the porch later, splitting a pizza and a couple beers under the stars. The river hummed below, crickets chirping in the grass, and I felt it. A peace I hadn't known I was chasing. Tara's betrayal, that truck stop, the years of taking her shit. It was all ash now, scattered by the wind of this life I'd built. Lena leaned her head on my shoulder, her hair tickling my neck, and I didn't need to say it. She knew. This was enough, more than enough. A year later, the crew hit a milestone, 10 sites under my belt, a small empire carved out of Sacramento's dust and steel. I'd hired more guys, trained them up, watched them turn from greenhorns into a team I'd trust with my life. Vic swung by one day, older and slower now, his gruff voice softer as he surveyed the yard. "Didn't burn it down," he said, clapping my shoulder with a rare smile. "Proud of you, kid," I nodded, throat tight. "Couldn't have started without you." He waved it off, but the weight of it lingered. Rusty, Vic, Lena, they'd been the anchors when Tara cut me loose, the ones who didn't laugh or leave. I owed them more than I could ever repay, but I tried. Kept the crew tight. Kept Lena close, kept moving forward. Then the letter came. Not animail, not a text, but a handwritten envelope slipped into our mailbox on a crisp fall morning. Tara's scrawl stared back at me, shaky and uneven, postmarked from some nowhere town in Arizona. I stood in the kitchen, coffee mug steaming in my hand, and almost tossed it unopened. Lena walked in, saw my face, and paused. "What's that?" "Her," I said, voice flat, holding it up like evidence. She didn't flinch, just poured herself a cup and leaned against the counter. "You gonna read it?" I tore it open, not out of want, but to prove it couldn't touch me anymore. The words spilled out in Hermes's script. "Jake, I'm sorry. I know you hate me and I deserve it. I lost everything, house, business, the girls. Vanessa's in jail, Kim's gone. I'm alone now and I can't stop thinking about what I did to you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know. No pleas, no guilt trips, just our raw, broken confession signed with her name. I read it twice, waiting for the old anger to flare, the sting of betrayal to bite. It didn't. I felt nothing. Not hate, not pity, just a blank space where she used to live in me. Lena watched, quiet, as I folded the letter and dropped it in the trash. "You good?" she asked, sipping her coffee. "Yeah," I said, and meant it. "She's nothing to me now." She nodded, a flicker of a smile on her lips, and that was that. Tara's ghost didn't haunt me anymore. She was just a story that ended, a chapter I'd closed years ago with a bus ticket and a middle finger. Time rolled on, steady and unrelenting. The crew thrived, 15 sites by year 5, a name that carried weight in Sacramento and beyond. Lena opened her own garage, a gritty little shop by the river where she fixed rigs and taught me to wrench. Better than I mowed. We adopted a mutt from the pound, a scrappy thing we named Rusty after the guy who'd pulled me out of the desert, and he'd bark at the mailman like it was his job. Life was loud, messy, full, and I loved every damn second of it. One evening I stood in Theod, tossing a ball for Rusty while Lena hammered at something in the garage. The sun dipped low, painting the river gold, and I caught my reflection in the water, older, harder, but steady. Tara crossed my mind for a split second. Her litter, her tears, her wreckage, and I let it drift away, carried off by the current. She'd left me with nothing, thinking I'd break, but she'd been wrong. I'd built this. Every beam, every bond, every laugh, with my own hands, my own grit. Lena called out, "You gonna stand there all night, or you gonna help me with this damn manifold?" I grinned, tossing the balloon last time for Rusty, and headed her way. "Coming, boss," she laughed, and I stepped into the garage, into the life I'd made, free, whole and mine.